the tranquil grounds of Harrow Hall, a rare jewel of a bird, the crimson-crested astrapia, vanishes from its locked cage during a bustling exhibition, leaving no trace but a single footprint. Enter Miss Jane Marple, whose gentle demeanor hides a razor-sharp mind. As whispers of debt, ambition, and dark secrets swirl around a zookeeper, a trainer, a curious visitor, and a shadowy stranger, Miss Marple unravels a web of deception, leading to a cunning smuggler and a hidden black market deal. Will she recover the bird before it's lost forever? Step into a classic mystery where every clue counts and no one is quite what they seem. Chapter 1. The Empty Cage. The lace curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead fluttered gently in the late summer breeze, casting delicate shadows across the parlor where she sat, her knitting needles clicking with a rhythm as steady as her thoughts. The village was quiet that morning, save for the distant hum of a lawnmower and the occasional trill of a blackbird. Yet Miss Marple's attention was not on the serene familiarity of her surroundings, but on a letter, its envelope creased and its contents urgent, lying open on the table beside her. The handwriting was that of Lady Beatrice Harrow, an old-school friend whose composure rarely faltered, until now. "My dear Jane," the letter began, "I am in dire need of your insight. A calamity has struck Harrow Hall. The crimson-crested astrapia, our rarest and most treasured bird, vanished from its cage during yesterday's public exhibition. The lock was untouched, the aviary secure, yet the bird is gone. I am certain it was stolen, and I fear for its fate. Please, come at once. Your clarity is my only hope." Miss Marple set the letter down, her pale blue eyes narrowing behind her spectacles. A rare bird, she mused, was a prize not unlike a sapphire or an heirloom. Its value lay not only in its beauty, but in the desires it awakened in others. She had read of the astrapia in the papers, a creature of the New Guinea highlands, its feathers a cascade of crimson and emerald, its tail a shimmering arc that caught the light like stained glass. To steal such a creature required not just audacity, but knowledge, and perhaps a touch of greed. Her fingers paused on the wool, then resumed their work. "A puzzle," she murmured, "and one that will not unravel itself." She rose, her movements brisk despite her years, and rang for her maid Lily to prepare a valise. The afternoon train to Harrow Hall was but an hour away, and Miss Marple was not one to delay when a friend was in distress. As Lily bustled about, Miss Marple's mind turned to the nature of theft. In her experience, it was rarely about the object alone. A thief's motive, be it desperation, envy, or ambition, left traces as surely as footprints in a garden bed. She tucked her knitting into a basket, selected a sensible hat, and stepped out into the sunlight, her thoughts already at Harrow Hall. The train journey was uneventful, save for the chatter of a fellow passenger, a young man who spoke at length about exotic birds and their allure. Miss Marple listened politely, noting his enthusiasm, but also the way his eyes gleamed when he mentioned their value on certain markets. Not the sort of man one trusts near a locked cage, she thought, though she smiled and nodded as he prattled on. By the time the train pulled into Harrow Station, she had already begun to weave a mental tapestry of possibilities, each thread a question. Who had access to the aviary? Who stood to gain? And why, in a crowd of onlookers, had no one seen the bird vanish? Lady Beatrice met her at the station, her face pale beneath her elegant hat. "Jane, thank heavens you're here," she said, grasping Miss Marple's hands. "The police are baffled, and I cannot bear the thought of that poor creature in some villain's hands." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held a spark of determination that Miss Marple admired. They drove to Harrow Hall in a sleek motor car, the countryside blurring past as Lady Beatrice recounted the exhibition, a charity event to showcase the zoo's treasures, attended by locals, enthusiasts, and a few strangers. The Astrapia had been the star, its cage a focal point until, at the day's end, it was found empty. As they approached the hall, its sprawling grounds came into view, the zoo's enclosures nestled among ancient oaks and manicured hedges. Miss Marple's first request was to see the aviary. They crossed the lawn, passing peacocks that strutted with indifferent grace, until they reached a domed structure of wrought iron and glass. The cage of the Astrapia stood at its center, gilded and ornate, its door slightly ajar. The lock gleamed, unmarred by scratches or force. Inside, a perch swayed gently, as if mocking the absence of its occupant. Miss Marple leaned closer, her eyes scanning the floor. The earth was soft, raked smooth, but there, near the base of the cage, was a single, faint footprint, narrow, with a distinct heel, half hidden by a leaf. "Curious," she said softly, crouching to study it. "A bird does not unlock its own cage, nor does a thief pass without a trace." She straightened, her gaze sweeping the aviary. The crowd, Lady Beatrice said, had numbered perhaps 50, but only 4 had lingered near the cage. Mr. Dobbs, the zookeeper, Miss Henshaw, the trainer, Mr. Price, a visitor with a sketchbook, and a stranger, Mr. Lang, who had no clear reason to be there. Miss Marple nodded, her expression serene, but her mind alight. "I should like to meet them," she said, "and hear what they have to say." Lady Beatrice hesitated. "The police have questioned them, Jane, but they found nothing conclusive." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, almost apologetic. "The police are thorough, my dear, but they sometimes miss what a village spinster might notice. People, you see, are not so different from birds. They reveal themselves in their habits." She turned back to the cage, her fingers brushing the lock. The mystery of the crimson-crested Astrapia had begun, and Miss Jane Marple was determined to see it through. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The late afternoon sun bathed the grounds of Harrow Hall in a warm, amber glow, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns and gravel paths that led to the private zoo. Miss Jane Marple, her small valise still in hand, followed Lady Beatrice Harrow through the wrought-iron gates of the zoo, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles, taking in every detail with the quiet precision of a botanist studying a rare flower. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant calls of exotic creatures, a chattering monkey, a parrot's shrill cry, the low rumble of some unseen beast. Yet Miss Marple's attention was fixed on the task at hand, the disappearance of the crimson-crested Astrapia, a bird whose absence had left a void as palpable as a missing star in a clear night sky. Lady Beatrice, her face still taut with worry, gestured toward the aviary, a domed structure of glass and iron that gleamed like a jewel in the fading light. "It was here, Jane," she said, her voice low, as if fearful of disturbing the very air that had witnessed the theft. "The cage was locked, the door secure, and yet the bird is gone. It's unthinkable." Her gloved hands twisted together, betraying a nervousness that Miss Marple noted with a flicker of sympathy. Lady Beatrice was not a woman given to histrionics, and this distress spoke of a deeper fear, perhaps for the bird, perhaps for the reputation of Harrow Hall itself. They approached the aviary, its glass panels reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. Inside, a network of slender pathways wound between enclosures housing birds of every hue, parrots with feathers like crushed rubies, finches that darted like sparks, and a lone toucan that regarded them with a haughty tilt of its beak. At the center stood the cage of the Astrapia, a gilded affair of Baroque design, its bars curling like tendrils of ivy. The door hung slightly ajar, as if inviting scrutiny, and the lock, a sturdy brass mechanism, showed no signs of tampering. The perch within was empty, swaying faintly in the breeze that slipped through the open door, and the floor of the cage was lined with soft earth, raked smooth by careful hands. Miss Marple paused at the threshold, her gaze sweeping the scene with the meticulous care of one accustomed to finding truth in the smallest details. "A beautiful cage," she murmured, "and yet beauty does not ensure security." She stepped closer, her sensible shoes crunching softly on the gravel path, and bent to examine the lock. It was a modern design, with a keyhole too narrow for crude tools, and its surface was unmarred by scratches or dents. "No force was used," she said, almost to herself. "The thief had a key, or a very clever hand." Lady Beatrice nodded, her eyes darting to the cage as if expecting the bird to reappear. "Mr. Dobbs, the zookeeper, swears he locked it after the last feeding, and Miss Henshaw, the trainer, checked it before the exhibition began. They're both devoted to the animals, Jane. I cannot believe either would betray us." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her eyes held a glint of steel. "Devotion, my dear Beatrice, is a fine quality, but it does not preclude temptation. People, you see, are not always what they seem, even to those who know them best." She turned her attention to the floor of the cage, crouching with surprising ease for a woman of her years. The earth was soft, almost powdery, and bore the faint marks of a rake's tines. Yet there, near the base of the perch, was the footprint she had noticed earlier. A single, delicate impression, narrow and distinct, with a heel that suggested a shoe of quality rather than a laborer's boot. It was half concealed by a fallen leaf, as if the thief had taken care to cover their tracks, but had not been entirely thorough. "Curious," Miss Marple said, straightening. "A footprint so faint suggests caution, but not perfection. Our thief was in a hurry, perhaps, or distracted." She glanced at the surrounding aviary, noting the high windows, all closed, and the single entrance, which led back to the main path. "No one climbed in, I think, and the bird did not fly out on its own. Tell me, Beatrice, who was near the cage during the exhibition?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her brow furrowing as she recalled the day. "It was crowded, Jane, 50 or more people, locals mostly, but some strangers too. The Astrapia was the highlight, you see. We'd advertised its display, and it drew quite a crowd. Mr. Dobbs was tending the other animals, but he checked the aviary now and then. Miss Henshaw was showing the bird's tricks to the visitors. She'd trained it to flutter its wings in a charming way. Then there was Mr. Price, a gentleman with a sketchbook, who seemed very taken with the Astrapia. And there was another man, a Mr. Lang, who introduced himself as a merchant passing through. He lingered near the cage longer than most. Miss Marple's needles, though left in her cottage, seemed to click in her mind as she filed away each name. "A zookeeper, a trainer, a visitor, and a stranger," she said softly. "A small cast, but a varied one. And the crowd. Did anyone see the moment the bird vanished?" "No," Lady Beatrice said, her voice tinged with frustration. The exhibition lasted from noon until 4, and the cage was found empty just after, when Dobbs came to close the aviary. The visitors had already begun to leave, and no one reported anything unusual. The police searched the grounds, but they found nothing. No feathers, no tools, no sign of the bird. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes returning to the footprint. A theft in plain sight. She mused, is either very bold or very clever. Let us walk the grounds, Beatrice, and see what else they might tell us. They stepped out of the aviary, following the path that circled the zoo. The enclosures were a marvel of design, each tailored to its occupants. A pond for flamingos, a rocky outcrop for a pair of ibex, a shaded grove where lemurs swung lazily from branch to branch. Yet Miss Marple's attention was on the smaller details, the scuff of a shoe on a stone, the angle of a hedge, the way the gravel crunched underfoot. They paused at a low hedge near the aviary's entrance, where the path diverged toward the main house and the village beyond. Miss Marple bent again, her fingers brushing the leaves. "Here," she said, pointing to a single blade of grass, bent and slightly discolored, as if pressed by something heavy. Someone stood here, perhaps watching the aviary. The grass is not broken, so it was a brief pause, but deliberate. She straightened, her gaze following the path toward the village. Did Mr. Lang, this merchant, say where he was staying? At the Red Lion, in the village, Lady Beatrice replied. He was polite, but there was something about him, Jane. Too smooth, perhaps, like a man playing a part. Miss Marple's lips twitched in a faint smile. A man who plays a part is often hiding a truth. And Mr. Price, the visitor, what do we know of him? A bird enthusiast, or so he said, Lady Beatrice answered. He carried a notebook, sketching the astrapia and asking questions about its habits. He seemed harmless, but he was alone for some time during the exhibition, wandering the grounds. And Miss Henshaw, the trainer? Miss Marple pressed, her tone gentle but insistent. Clara is brilliant with the birds, Lady Beatrice said. Young, ambitious, perhaps a bit proud, but devoted. She's been with us for 2 years, and the astrapia was her pride and joy. She'd never harm it. Miss Marple nodded, her expression unreadable. Devotion, as I said, is a fine quality, but it can blind us to other possibilities. And Mr. Dobbs, the zookeeper, his habits? Ernest has been with us for 20 years, Lady Beatrice said, a note of loyalty in her voice. He knows every creature here as if they were his own, but I've heard whispers, Jane. He's had money troubles lately, debts from a failed investment, they say. I don't believe he'd steal, but whispers have a way of pointing to truths, Miss Marple finished, her voice soft. Let us not judge yet, Beatrice, but let us observe. They continued their walk, circling back toward the aviary. Miss Marple noted the layout of the zoo, the main entrance where visitors had streamed in, the side paths less traveled but not hidden, and the service gate used by the staff, which led to a narrow lane toward the village. A thief, she said, almost to herself, would need a way out and a way to carry, a bird without notice, a small cage, perhaps, or a covered basket. Lady Beatrice shivered. The thought of that poor creature in some smuggler's hands, it's unbearable, Jane. Miss Marple placed a hand on her friend's arm. We shall find it, Beatrice, but first I must meet these people, Dobbs, Henshaw, Price, and this Mr. Lang. Their words will tell us much, and their silences more. She glanced back at the aviary, the empty cage glinting in the twilight. A bird does not vanish without a trace, and neither does a thief. They returned to the house, where Lady Beatrice arranged for the suspects to be available the next morning. As they dined in the grand dining room, surrounded by portraits of Harrow ancestors, Miss Marple's mind was elsewhere, sifting through the day's observations. The footprint, the bent grass, the locked cage, the crowd of strangers and familiars, all were pieces of a puzzle that, in her experience, would fit together only when seen from the right angle. She thought of her garden in St. Mary Mead, where a single weed could betray the health of the soil, and of the people she had known, whose smallest gestures revealed their hearts. As she retired to her room, a modest guest chamber overlooking the zoo, Miss Marple stood at the window, watching the shadows deepen over the aviary. "A theft in broad daylight," she murmured, "requires not just cunning, but opportunity. And opportunity, I think, was made, not found." Her needles, had they been in her hands, would have clicked with satisfaction. The mystery of the crimson-crested astrapia was no longer a blank page, but a story beginning to take shape, and Miss Jane Marple was determined to read it to its end. Chapter 3. The Zookeeper's Tale. The morning mist hung low over the grounds of Harrow Hall, curling around the zoo's enclosures like a gossamer veil. Miss Jane Marple, wrapped in a sensible woolen shawl against the autumn chill, sat in the morning room with a cup of tea, her eyes fixed not on the steaming porcelain, but on the figure approaching across the lawn. Mr. Ernest Dobbs, the zookeeper, was a broad-shouldered man, whose weathered face bore the lines of years spent outdoors, tending creatures more predictable than the humans around him. His cap was clutched tightly in his hands, twisted as if it were a lifeline, and his gait was heavy, purposeful, yet tinged with unease. Lady Beatrice, seated opposite Miss Marple, leaned forward. "Ernest is devoted, Jane," she said, her voice a mix of loyalty and doubt. "He's been with us since my father's time, caring for the animals as if they were his own. But I must confess, there have been rumors, nothing certain, mind you, about debts. A failed venture, I believe, in some agricultural scheme." Miss Marple's eyes flickered with interest, though her expression remained serene. "Rumors, Beatrice, are like shadows, vague, but often cast by something real. Let us hear what Mr. Dobbs has to say." She set her teacup down, her movements precise, and turned her attention to the man as he entered the room, ushered in by a nervous housemaid. Ernest Dobbs stood just inside the doorway, his cap now a crumpled mass in his hands. He was perhaps 50, with a ruddy complexion and eyes that darted between Lady Beatrice and her guest, settling on neither. His boots, heavy and scuffed, left faint traces of earth on the polished floor, and Miss Marple noted the contrast with the delicate footprint she had seen in the aviary. "You wish to see me, my lady?" he said, his voice gruff but respectful. "About the bird, I reckon?" "Indeed, Mr. Dobbs," Miss Marple said, her tone gentle, almost maternal. "I am Miss Marple, a friend of Lady Beatrice, come to help unravel this unfortunate matter. Will you sit and tell us about the day the astrapia vanished?" Dobbs hesitated, then lowered himself into a chair, his bulk making the delicate frame creak. "I've told the police all I know," he began, his words slow, as if testing the ground. "I fed the bird at dusk the day before the exhibition, locked the cage, and checked it again that morning. Everything was as it should be. Then the crowd came, and I was busy with the other animals. A macaw was poorly, needed tending. When I came back to the aviary at day's end, the cage was empty. Door ajar, lock untouched, bird gone. Miss Marple's eyes, bright and unyielding behind her spectacles, studied him. "And you are certain you locked the cage, Mr. Dobbs? No chance of oversight with so many duties to attend?" His face reddened, a flush creeping up from his collar. 20 years I've done this work, miss. I don't forget locks, nor leave cages open. That bird was my pride. Raised it from a fledgling, I did. Someone took it, plain as day, but it wasn't me. His voice held a note of indignation, but his fingers twisted the cap tighter, and Miss Marple noted the faint tremor in them. "Quite so," she said soothingly. "And during the exhibition, where were you? The macaw, you say. Could anyone confirm you were with it?" Dobbs shifted in his seat, his eyes dropping to the floor. "I was in the west enclosure, tending the macaw's wing. It's a quiet spot, away from the crowd. No one was with me, but I wasn't gone long. Half an hour, maybe. When I got back, the aviary was still full of folk, and no one said nothing about the bird till later." Miss Marple nodded, her expression one of polite interest, though her mind was cataloging every word, every pause. "And the key to the cage, where is it kept?" "In the keeper's lodge, locked in a box," Dobbs said promptly. "Only me and Miss Henshaw have access, and the spare's with her ladyship." He glanced at Lady Beatrice, who nodded confirmation. "No one else could have taken it?" Miss Marple pressed, her voice soft but insistent. "Not unless they broke into the lodge," Dobbs said, his tone firm. "And there's no sign of that. The police checked." Miss Marple leaned back, her fingers resting lightly on the arm of her chair. "You've had a difficult time, Mr. Dobbs, with your duties here. I've heard talk, not from Lady Beatrice, mind you, of some financial troubles. Investments, perhaps, that didn't go as planned?" Dobbs's face darkened, and for a moment his eyes met hers, sharp with something that might have been fear or anger. "Village gossip," he muttered. "I had a bad turn with some farming shares. Aye, but I'm no thief. I'd sooner sell my own boots than harm one of my animals." His voice rose, then broke, and he looked away, his hands stilling on the cap. "Of course," Miss Marple said, her tone disarming. "I only ask because people in distress sometimes act against their nature. You understand, I'm sure." She smiled, and Dobbs seemed to relax, though his shoulders remained tense. Lady Beatrice interjected, her voice gentle. "Ernest, no one accuses you. We only want to find the bird." Dobbs nodded, but his eyes remained wary. "I'd give anything to have it back, my lady. That Astrapia. It's not just a bird. It's like a piece of the world's wonder. Gone missing." Miss Marple's smile deepened, though her mind was far from soothed. "A lovely sentiment, Mr. Dobbs. Tell me, did you notice anyone near the aviary during the exhibition? This Mr. Price, perhaps? Or the stranger, Mr. Lang?" Dobbs frowned, his brow furrowing. "Price was there, sketching, always with that notebook of his. Asked me questions about the bird's diet, its habits. Too many questions, if you ask me. Lang, now, he was quieter. Kept to himself, but I saw him by the cage, looking at it like he was measuring it, you know? Not like a man just admiring." "Measuring it," Miss Marple repeated, her voice thoughtful. "An interesting choice of words. And Miss Henshaw?" "She was showing off the Astrapia's tricks," Dobbs said. "Had the crowd charmed as always. She's good with the birds. Miss Henshaw is, but she's young, likes to be noticed. Maybe she didn't see what was happening right under her nose." Miss Marple nodded, her expression unchanged. "Thank you, Mr. Dobbs. You've been most helpful. I may wish to speak with you again, if you don't mind." He rose, his cap now a shapeless lump in his hands. "Anything to get the bird back, miss." He nodded to Lady Beatrice and left, his heavy steps echoing in the quiet room. As the door closed, Lady Beatrice turned to Miss Marple. "What do you think, Jane? Ernest has always been loyal, but those debts—" Miss Marple's eyes were distant, as if seeing something beyond the room. "Loyalty, Beatrice, is a virtue, but it can be tested by want. Mr. Dobbs is a man of habit, and habits are revealing. He locks cages, he tends sick birds, he speaks with pride of his work. Yet his hands tremble, and his alibi is thin. Not proof, mind you, but a thread to follow." She paused, her gaze sharpening. "And his mention of Mr. Lang, measuring the cage, that is not the language of a casual observer." Lady Beatrice shivered. "You think Lang is involved?" "I think," Miss Marple said, "that we must meet all our players before the curtain rises. Mr. Dobbs has given us a start, but there are others to hear." Chapter 4. The Trainer's Confidence. The morning room at Harrow Hall, with its tall windows overlooking the dew-kissed gardens, was bathed in a soft light that did little to ease the tension lingering from Mr. Dobbs's departure. Miss Jane Marple sat poised in her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes bright with the quiet alertness of one who saw more than she spoke. Lady Beatrice, still unsettled by the zookeeper's nervous demeanor, sipped her tea with a distracted air, her thoughts clearly on the missing crimson-crested Astrapia. The housemaid announced the next visitor, and Miss Clara Henshaw entered, her step brisk and her posture as straight as a sapling. Clara Henshaw was a young woman of perhaps 25, with sharp features and dark hair pinned neatly beneath a practical hat. Her eyes, a striking green, held a spark of confidence that bordered on defiance, and she carried a clipboard tucked under one arm, as if it were an extension of herself. Her dress was simple but immaculate, her boots polished to a mirror shine, and Miss Marple noted the absence of any trace of the aviary's soft earth on them. This was a woman, she thought, who took pride in her precision, and pride, in Miss Marple's experience, could be both a shield and a mask. "Good morning, Lady Beatrice, Miss Marple," Clara said, her voice clear and clipped, as if addressing a committee. "I understand you're inquiring about the Astrapia. I'll tell you everything I know, though I'm afraid it won't be much. The bird was in my care, and its loss is, well, it's a blow." Her lips tightened, but her gaze remained steady, meeting Miss Marple's without flinching. Miss Marple smiled, her expression warm and disarming, as if they were discussing nothing more pressing than a village fete. "Miss Henshaw, I'm told you trained the Astrapia for its display during the exhibition. A remarkable feat, I'm sure, for such a rare creature. Will you tell me about your work with it?" Clara's face softened, a flicker of pride breaking through her reserve. "The Astrapia was a joy to train," she said, her voice warming. "It's intelligent, you know, far more than most birds. I taught it to flutter its wings in a particular pattern, a sort of dance, to show off its plumage. The crowd loved it, and the bird seemed to enjoy the attention. I was with it most of the morning, setting up for the exhibition, and it was in perfect health, perfectly content." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes never leaving Clara's face. "And when did you last see it? Before it vanished?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening briefly on the clipboard. "Just before noon, when the exhibition began. I checked the cage, made sure the lock was secure, and then stepped out to guide the visitors. The aviary was crowded, and I was explaining the Astrapia's habits to a group near the entrance. I didn't go back to the cage until after 4, when Mr. Dobbs found it empty. Her voice was steady, but Miss Marple noted the slight quickening of her breath, as if the memory stirred unease. "You were with the visitors the entire time?" Miss Marple asked, her tone gentle but probing. "No chance to return to the cage, perhaps to check on the bird?" Clara's eyes narrowed, though her smile remained polite. "I was busy, Miss Marple. The exhibition was my responsibility, keeping the crowd orderly, answering questions. I trusted the cage was secure. Mr. Dobbs had locked it, and I'd checked it myself. There was no need to hover." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her voice soothing. "And the key? Mr. Dobbs mentioned it's kept in the keeper's lodge. You have access to it, I presume?" "Yes," Clara said, her tone crisp. "I need it for training sessions, to move the birds when necessary. But I didn't touch it that day, not after the morning check. The lodge is locked, and only Mr. Dobbs and I have keys to it." Miss Marple's fingers twitched, as if longing for her knitting needles to steady her thoughts. "A well-organized system," she said. "And during the exhibition, did you notice anyone near the Astrapia's cage? Mr. Price, perhaps, or this Mr. Lang?" Clara's expression hardened, a flash of something, irritation, perhaps, crossing her face. "Mr. Price was there, always sketching, asking questions about the bird's feathers, its diet, even its weight. He's an enthusiast, but a bit intense. As for Mr. Lang, I saw him near the cage once or twice. He didn't say much, just watched the bird with a strange sort of focus. I thought he was just another curious visitor, but he didn't join the groups I was guiding." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes thoughtful. "A strange sort of focus," she repeated. "That's an interesting observation, Miss Henshaw. And Mr. Dobbs, did you see him near the aviary during the exhibition?" Clara shrugged, a quick, dismissive gesture. "He was in and out, tending the other animals. He's always busy, scurrying about like a beetle. I didn't pay him much mind." Her tone held a hint of condescension, and Miss Marple noted it, filing it away with the other threads of the case. "You sound very confident in your work, Miss Henshaw," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. "It must be rewarding to have such skill with creatures like the Astrapia. I imagine it opens doors, perhaps opportunities beyond Harrow Hall." Clara's eyes flickered, a guarded look replacing her earlier assurance. "I'm happy here," she said quickly. "Lady Beatrice has been good to me, and the zoo is, well, it's a rare place to work. But yes, I suppose my skills could take me further. I've had offers, zoological societies, private collectors. I've not taken them, though." Miss Marple's smile was as gentle as ever, but her mind was sharp, piecing together the picture. "A young woman with ambition," she said, almost to herself, "and ambition, like pride, can be a powerful thing." She paused, then continued, her tone unchanged. "Tell me, Miss Henshaw, did you notice anything unusual during the exhibition? A sound? A movement? Anything out of place?" Clara frowned, her fingers tapping the clipboard. "Nothing specific," she said. "The crowd was noisy, children running about, people asking questions. If someone opened the cage, they'd have needed to be quick and quiet. I was focused on my duties, not watching every corner of the aviary." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her voice soothing. "You had much to manage. One last thing. Your boots, Miss Henshaw. They're remarkably clean, despite the soft earth in the aviary. You take great care with your appearance, don't you?" Clara blinked, caught off guard. Yes, I suppose so. I don't like mess. The aviary's earth sticks to everything, so I clean my boots after every shift." Her tone was defensive, and Miss Marple noted the slight flush on her cheeks. "A commendable habit," Miss Marple said, rising to signal the end of the conversation. "Thank you, Miss Henshaw. You've been most helpful. I may need to speak with you again, if you don't mind." Clara stood, clutching her clipboard a little tighter. "Of course, Miss Marple. I want the bird found as much as anyone." She nodded to Lady Beatrice and left, her steps as brisk as when she'd arrived. Lady Beatrice turned to Miss Marple, her brow furrowed. "Clara's so capable, Jane, but she seemed guarded. Do you think she's hiding something?" Miss Marple's eyes were distant, as if seeing the aviary's empty cage. "Miss Henshaw is a young woman of precision and pride," she said softly. "She knows her worth, and that can make one protective of one's position. Her alibi is vague, her boots too clean for one who works in soft earth, and her dismissal of Mr. Dobbs suggests a certain superiority. Not guilt, perhaps, but something to consider." She paused, her gaze sharpening. "And her mention of Mr. Lang's focus. It echoes Mr. Dobbs's words. Two people independently noting the same man's behavior. That, Beatrice, is a thread worth pulling." Lady Beatrice sighed, her hands twisting together. "I wish I could believe it was a stranger, Jane, but Clara and Ernest, they've been with us so long. Could they really be involved?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle, almost apologetic. "People, my dear, are like birds in a cage. They may seem content, but given the chance, some will fly or be taken. Let us meet this Mr. Price next and see what his sketches reveal." She glanced out the window where the mist was lifting, revealing the zoo's enclosures in sharp relief. The mystery of the Astrapia was growing clearer, not in answers, but in questions, and Miss Marple knew that each conversation was a step closer to the truth. Chapter 5. The Visitor's Curiosity. The morning at Harrow Hall had deepened into a crisp, clear day, the sun now high enough to burn away the last wisps of mist that clung to the zoo's grounds. Miss Jane Marple, seated once more in the morning room, sipped her second cup of tea, her eyes resting on the window, where the distant aviary glinted like a beacon of unanswered questions. Lady Beatrice, ever the attentive hostess, had arranged for the next interview, and her nervous fidgeting with a lace handkerchief betrayed her growing unease. The loss of the crimson-crested Astrapia was not merely a theft. It was a wound to the pride of Harrow Hall, and Miss Marple sensed her friend's desperation for resolution. The housemaid announced Mr. Leonard Price, and a man of middle years entered, his appearance as unassuming as a sparrow among peacocks. He was slight, with thinning hair and spectacles that slipped down his nose, giving him a perpetually distracted air. His coat, though well-tailored, bore faint creases and a smudge of earth on one cuff, a detail Miss Marple noted with a flicker of interest. In his hands, he clutched a worn leather notebook, its edges frayed from frequent use. He bowed awkwardly to Lady Beatrice, then turned to Miss Marple, his eyes blinking rapidly behind his glasses. "Mr. Price, I presume?" Miss Marple said, her voice warm and inviting, as if welcoming a neighbor to tea. "I am Miss Marple, a friend of Lady Beatrice, here to inquire about the unfortunate loss of the Astrapia. I understand you were at the exhibition, sketching the bird. Will you tell me about it?" Price adjusted his spectacles, a nervous habit, and sat gingerly on the edge of a chair. "Yes, Miss Marple," he said, his voice soft but earnest. "I'm a bird enthusiast, you see. Not a professional mind, just a hobbyist. The Astrapia was extraordinary. Its plumage, the way the light caught its feathers, it was like nothing I'd ever seen. I was sketching it, trying to capture the colors, the iridescence." He opened his notebook, revealing pages filled with meticulous drawings, each feather rendered with almost scientific precision. Miss Marple leaned forward, her eyes scanning the sketches. "These are remarkable, Mr. Price," she said, her tone genuinely admiring. "You have a keen eye for detail. I see you've noted the bird's measurements, its wingspan, its weight. That's quite specific for a sketch, isn't it?" Price flushed, his fingers tightening on the notebook. "Oh, well, I like to be thorough," he said quickly. "It helps with my studies. I keep a record of all the birds I see, habits, sizes, behaviors. The Astrapia was so rare, I wanted to get it just right." His voice wavered slightly, and Miss Marple noted the way his eyes darted to the side, avoiding her gaze. "Of course," she said, her smile unwavering. "And where were you during the exhibition? Near the cage, I imagine, to make such detailed drawings?" Price nodded, pushing his spectacles up again. "Yes, I was by the aviary most of the time. Miss Henshaw was showing the birds tricks, and the crowd was gathered round, but I stayed near the cage to sketch. I didn't want to miss a moment of it." He paused, then added, "I didn't see anything odd, though. Just people coming and going, asking questions. When I left, the bird was still there. Or so I thought." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, though her expression remained benign. "And when did you leave the aviary, Mr. Price? Before or after the exhibition ended?" He hesitated, his fingers drumming lightly on the notebook. "It was toward the end, I suppose. Around 4 o'clock. I wandered the grounds a bit afterward. Got a bit lost, actually. The zoo's larger than it looks, and I'm not familiar with the paths." His voice was earnest, but there was a faint strain in it, as if he were choosing his words with care. "Lost," Miss Marple repeated softly, her tone devoid of judgment. "That can happen in such a place. And your coat, Mr. Price? I couldn't help but notice a bit of earth on the cuff. From the aviary, perhaps, or your wanderings." Price glanced at his sleeve, his face coloring again. "Oh, that? Yes, I must have brushed against something. The paths are muddy in places, you know." He rubbed at the smudge with his thumb, his movements quick and self-conscious. Miss Marple nodded, her gaze lingering on the cuff. The earth was not unlike the soft soil of the aviary, though she made no comment on it. "Tell me, Mr. Price, did you notice anyone else near the cage? Miss Henshaw, perhaps? Or Mr. Dobbs? Or this Mr. Lang, the merchant?" Price's brow furrowed, as if sifting through memories. "Miss Henshaw was busy with the crowd, showing off the bird. Mr. Dobbs came by once or twice, checking the cages, but he didn't stay long. As for Mr. Lang, yes, I saw him. He was standing by the aviary, not sketching or talking, just watching. He had a sharp look about him, like he was studying the cage, not just the bird. I thought it odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time." "A sharp look," Miss Marple murmured, her mind filing away the phrase so similar to the observations of Dobbs and Henshaw. "And did you speak with him, Mr. Price, or with anyone else about the Astrapia?" "No, I kept to myself," Price said, his voice firm. "I'm not much for chatter. I spoke to Miss Henshaw briefly, asking about the bird's diet. She was helpful, but busy. I didn't talk to Lang or anyone else, really. I was focused on my sketches. He opened the notebook again, as if to prove. His point showing a page with notes on the Astrapia's plumage and a small diagram of its cage. Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the diagram, which included the cage's dimensions and the placement of the lock. "You've a talent for observation, Mr. Price," she said, her tone warm but probing. "This diagram, it's almost as if you were studying the cage as much as the bird. Were you interested in its construction?" Price blinked, his fingers tightening on the notebook. "Oh, no, not really. I like to be thorough, as I said. The cage is part of the bird's environment, isn't it? I wanted to capture the whole scene." His voice was earnest, but there was a slight tremor in it, and Miss Marple noted the way his spectacles slipped again, as if his nervousness were pushing them down. "Of course," she said, her smile as gentle as ever. "And you're certain you saw nothing unusual? No one lingering too long? No strange sounds or movements?" Price shook his head, his eyes meeting hers briefly before dropping to the notebook. "Nothing I can recall, Miss Marple. It was a busy day, lots of people about. If someone took the bird, they must have been quick. I wish I'd seen something, anything, to help." Miss Marple leaned back, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "You've been very helpful, Mr. Price. Your sketches are a treasure, and your memory of the day is most useful. I may need to speak with you again, if you don't mind." Price stood, clutching his notebook to his chest. "Of course, Miss Marple. Anything to help find the bird." He bowed awkwardly to Lady Beatrice and left, his steps quick and uneven, as if eager to escape the room. Lady Beatrice turned to Miss Marple, her handkerchief now a crumpled ball in her hands. "What do you make of him, Jane? He seems so harmless, but those sketches, why so detailed?" Miss Marple's eyes were thoughtful, her gaze fixed on the door through which Price had departed. "Mr. Price is a curious man, Beatrice. An enthusiast, yes, but his curiosity goes beyond admiration. His sketches are precise, almost clinical, and his notes on the cage suggest a mind that sees more than beauty. The earth on his cuff, too. It's a small thing, but it connects him to the aviary, however faintly." She paused, her lips pursing slightly. "And his mention of Mr. Lang's sharp look. It's the third time we've heard that description. 3 people, all noting the same man's behavior, without prompting. That, my dear, is not coincidence." Lady Beatrice shivered, her eyes wide. "You think Mr. Price could be involved? He seems so ordinary." Miss Marple's smile was faint, almost wistful. "Ordinary people, Beatrice, are often the most revealing. They hide their secrets in plain sight, like a bird blending into its feathers. Mr. Price may be what he seems, or he may be something more. Let us meet this Mr. Lang next and see what his sharp look reveals." She glanced out the window, where the zoo's paths wound like threads in a tapestry, each leading to a truth yet to be uncovered. The mystery of the Astrapia was a puzzle with many pieces, and Miss Marple was determined to fit them together, one careful observation at a time. Chapter 6. The Stranger in the Shadows. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Harrow Hall, casting intricate patterns on the morning room's polished floor, where Miss Jane Marple sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. The interviews with Mr. Dobbs, Miss Henshaw, and Mr. Price had woven a delicate web of impressions in her mind, each thread marked by subtle inconsistencies and shared observations about a certain Mr. Lang. Lady Beatrice, her nerves frayed by the mounting mystery of the crimson-crested Astrapia's disappearance, had arranged for this elusive figure to be summoned from the Red Lion Inn in the nearby village. As they awaited his arrival, Miss Marple's eyes wandered to the window, where the zoo's aviary stood like a silent sentinel, its empty cage a riddle yet to be solved. "Mr. Lang is a stranger to us, Jane," Lady Beatrice said, her voice low, as if speaking his name might summon something untoward. He appeared at the exhibition uninvited, claiming to be a merchant passing through. There was something about him, too polished perhaps for a man of trade. I can't shake the feeling he's more than he seems. Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her eyes were sharp behind her spectacles. A stranger, Beatrice, is often a mirror, reflecting what others choose to see. Let us meet this Mr. Lang and observe what he reflects. Her tone was calm, but her mind was already turning over the details. The footprint in the aviary, the bent grass by the hedge, the repeated mentions of Lang's sharp, measuring gaze. 3 witnesses, unconnected save by their presence at the exhibition, had noted his behavior. In Miss Marple's experience, such convergence was rarely accidental. The housemaid announced Mr. Victor Lang, and a man entered whose appearance seemed to confirm Lady Beatrice's unease. He was tall, with a lean frame and a jaw sharp enough to cut glass. His coat, of fine wool and tailored to perfection, spoke of wealth rather than the dusty roads of a merchant's life. His dark eyes moved quickly, taking in the room with a calculated sweep before settling on Miss Marple, with a smile that was both charming and guarded. He carried no hat, but his hands, gloved in soft leather, were empty of the tools or wares one might expect of a trader. "Lady Beatrice, Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I understand you're inquiring about the unfortunate loss of your bird. I'm happy to assist, though I'm afraid I know little of value." He took the offered chair, sitting with an ease that suggested familiarity with grand settings. His posture, relaxed yet alert. Miss Marple's expression was one of polite curiosity, as if discussing a minor village matter. "Mr. Lang, how kind of you to come. I'm told you were at the exhibition, near the aviary where the Astrapia was kept. Perhaps you could share what brought you there?" Lang's smile widened, revealing teeth too even for a man of the road. "A whim, Miss Marple," he said lightly. "I travel often, dealing in textiles, silks, linens, that sort of thing. I was passing through the village and heard of the exhibition. A rare bird like the Astrapia is a curiosity, even for a man like me. I thought to see it, perhaps sketch a memory for my travels." His gloved hands spread in a gesture of openness, but Miss Marple noted their stillness, as if schooled to betray nothing. "A sketch," she said, her tone encouraging. "Like Mr. Price, then, with his notebook. Did you make one, Mr. Lang?" He chuckled, a sound as smooth as his voice. No, I'm no artist. I meant a mental sketch, a moment to remember. The bird was striking, wasn't it? All that color like a living jewel. I stood by the cage for a while, admiring it, but I didn't linger long. Too many people, too much chatter. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes never leaving his face. "And yet, Mr. Lang, several people noticed you near the cage. They described you as focused, perhaps studying it. Would you say that's accurate?" Lang's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker so brief it might have gone unnoticed by a less observant eye. "Focused?" he repeated, his tone still light. "I suppose I was. Beauty demands attention, doesn't it? But I assure you, I was just another visitor, nothing more. His gloved fingers tapped once on the arm of the chair, a small gesture that Miss Marple filed away. "Of course," she said, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. "And where were you when the exhibition ended? Did you stay to see the other animals, or perhaps wander the grounds?" Lang leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his eyes wary. "I left shortly before the end, I believe. The crowd was thinning, and I had business to attend to at the inn. I walked back to the village, along the lane by the service gate. A pleasant stroll, though I confess I'm not much for country paths." His smile returned, but it was thinner now, less certain. Miss Marple's gaze dropped to his shoes, sleek and polished, their heels bearing a distinctive curve that matched the faint footprint in the aviary's soil. "A merchant's life must be demanding," she said, her tone conversational. "Always traveling, always seeking new markets. Do you deal in anything beyond textiles, Mr. Lang? Rare goods, perhaps?" His eyes narrowed slightly, though his smile held. "Textiles are my trade, Miss Marple. Silks from the East, linens from the continent. I've no interest in birds or beasts, save as a passing curiosity." His voice was firm, but there was a tightness to it, as if he were guarding a door he dared not open. Miss Marple nodded, her expression unchanged. "And your stay at the Red Lion? Comfortable, I hope? You've been there since the exhibition?" "Yes, a few days," Lang said, his tone easing. "A decent inn for a village. I plan to move on tomorrow, but I'm happy to stay if it helps your inquiry." His offer was gracious, but Miss Marple sensed a calculation behind it, as if he were testing the waters. "How kind," she said, her smile as warm as ever. "One last question, Mr. Lang. Did you notice anything unusual during the exhibition? Anyone near the cage who seemed out of place, perhaps?" Lang considered this, his gloved fingers tapping again. "It was a busy day, Miss Marple. People milling about, children running. That trainer, Miss Henshaw, was it? Showing off the bird. I saw Mr. Price with his sketches, and the zookeeper, Dobbs, checking the cages. Nothing struck me as odd, though I wasn't looking for trouble. If someone took the bird, they were clever about it." His eyes met hers, bold but guarded, as if daring her to probe further. Miss Marple's smile widened, though her eyes were as sharp as ever. "Cleverness, Mr. Lang, is a thief's best tool. Thank you for your time. I may need to speak with you again, if you're willing." "Of course," he said, rising with a fluid grace. He bowed to Lady Beatrice, his smile returning to its polished charm, and left the room, his steps silent on the polished floor. Lady Beatrice exhaled, her handkerchief now a crumpled knot. "What a man, Jane! So smooth, yet unsettling. Did you believe him?" Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the door, her mind sifting through Lang's words and gestures. "Mr. Lang is a man who speaks carefully, Beatrice, and careful speech often hides careful thought. His gloves, his shoes, his polished manner, they suggest a life more complex than a merchant's. And his focus on the cage, noted by 3 others, is a thread that grows thicker." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "His walk to the village, by the service gate, that lane passes near the hedge where I found the bent grass. A small thing, but small things build cases." Lady Beatrice's eyes widened. "You think he's the thief?" "I think," Miss Marple said softly, "that Mr. Lang is a man who knows more than he says. I should like to visit the Red Lion, Beatrice, and see what his room might tell us. A merchant's belongings, after all, reveal his trade." She glanced out the window, where the aviary's dome caught the afternoon light. The puzzle of the Astrapia was taking shape, and Mr. Lang, with his sharp eyes and gloved hands, was a piece that did not quite fit yet. Chapter 7. A Village Connection. The afternoon had deepened into a golden haze over the village of St. Mary Mead, where Miss Jane Marple had returned briefly to consult a source as reliable as any Scotland Yard detective, the village gossip. The Red Lion Inn, where Mr. Victor Lang was staying, was but a short walk from her cottage, and Miss Marple, her sensible hat firmly in place, set out with a purpose masked by her unassuming demeanor. The interviews at Harrow Hall had painted a vivid picture. Mr. Dobbs's nervous hands, Miss Henshaw's guarded pride, Mr. Price's meticulous sketches, and Mr. Lang's polished evasion. But it was Lang who lingered in her thoughts, his sharp gaze and sleek shoes aligning too neatly with the faint footprint in the aviary's soil. The village was bustling in its quiet way, with shopkeepers sweeping doorsteps and children darting through the lanes. Miss Marple's destination was not the inn itself, not yet, but the post office, where Mrs. Cleary, the postmistress, presided with an ear for every whisper and a memory for every parcel. Mrs. Cleary was a woman of middle years, with a round face and eyes that missed nothing, and Miss Marple knew her to be a treasure trove of local intelligence, provided one approached her with the right blend of tact and tea. The post office was a cozy nook, its counter cluttered with stamps and ledgers, the air thick with the scent of ink and sealing wax. Mrs. Cleary looked up from sorting letters, her face lighting with a smile as Miss Marple entered. "Why, Miss Marple, what a pleasure! Come about that bird business at Harrow Hall, I'll wager. The village is abuzz with it." Miss Marple's smile was warm, her eyes crinkling with just the right touch of shared curiosity. "You've heard, then, Mrs. Cleary. I'm helping Lady Beatrice with the matter, and I thought you might have seen something, or someone, that could shed light. A stranger, perhaps, passing through?" Mrs. Cleary leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, aye, there's been a stranger, a tall fellow, sharp-looking, staying at the Red Lion. Called himself Lang. A merchant, he said, but his hands are too clean for bolts of cloth, if you ask me. Came in here the day after the exhibition, sending a parcel to London. Small, it was, wrapped tight in brown paper, marked fragile in bold letters. Paid extra for haste, too, like he couldn't be rid of it fast enough." Miss Marple's fingers, though empty of her knitting needles, seemed to click in her mind. "A parcel," she said softly, her tone encouraging. "How interesting. Did you happen to see what was in it, Mrs. Cleary? Or perhaps where it was addressed?" Mrs. Cleary shook her head, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the tale. "No peeking, Miss Marple. You know me better than that. But I saw the address. Some place in London, a street I didn't recognize, and a name. Thorne, I think it was. Reginald Thorne. The parcel was heavy for its size, and I heard a faint rustle, like something moving inside. Could have been papers, mind, but it gave me a queer feeling." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, though her smile remained serene. "A rustle, you say? And Mr. Lang, did he seem anxious or in a hurry?" "Anxious as a cat in a storm," Mrs. Cleary said, nodding vigorously. "Kept looking over his shoulder, like he thought someone was watching. Paid in cash, no questions, and was out the door before I could say more than, 'Good day.' Not the sort to linger for a chat, that one." Miss Marple nodded, her mind weaving this new thread into the tapestry of the case. A parcel, sent the day after the theft, marked fragile and addressed to a London name. Reginald Thorne. The rustle, faint but telling, suggested something alive, something small enough to fit a cage. "You've been most helpful, Mrs. Cleary," she said, her voice warm. "One more thing. Did Mr. Lang send anything else, or receive any letters while he's been here?" Mrs. Cleary pursed her lips, thinking. "No letters, Miss Marple, but he did ask about the train times to London. Same day he sent the parcel. Said he might be leaving soon, though he's still at the inn, far as I know. Queer sort of merchant, if you ask me. No samples, no talk of trade, just that parcel and a lot of looking about." Miss Marple's smile deepened, though her eyes were sharp as needles. "Queer indeed. Thank you, Mrs. Cleary. I may stop by again if you don't mind." She left the post office, her steps slow but purposeful, her mind turning over the new information. A parcel to London, a name, a rustle. These were not proof, but they were signposts, pointing toward a truth that was beginning to take shape. She decided to visit the Red Lion, a sturdy old inn at the village's heart, its sign swinging gently in the breeze. The landlord, Mr. Gibbs, was a jovial man with a knack for remembering his guests, and Miss Marple found him polishing glasses behind the bar. "Miss Marple," he greeted, his face creasing with a grin. "Come about that fancy bird, I reckon. Everyone's talking about it." "Something like that, Mr. Gibbs," Miss Marple said, her tone light. "I understand a Mr. Lang is staying here. A merchant, I believe. Could you tell me about him?" Gibbs's grin faded slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Lang, aye. Tall chap, smooth talker, checked in a few days before the exhibition. Keeps to himself, mostly, but he's got a way about him, like he's always watching. Paid for his room in advance, cash, no fuss. Keeps a locked case in his room. Small, like a birdcage, though I've not seen inside it. Said it's for his samples, but he don't show 'em to anyone." Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her expression remained placid. "A locked case," she said softly. "How interesting. Has he had any visitors, or made any calls?" "No visitors," Gibbs said, "but he used the telephone yesterday, late. Couldn't hear much, but he sounded sharp, like he was giving orders. Mentioned London, and a name. Thorne, I think. Same as on a letter I saw on his table when I brought. Up his tea. Didn't read it, mind, but the name stuck." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. "You've a good memory, Mr. Gibbs. One last thing, his shoes. Have you noticed them? Fine leather, perhaps, with a distinctive heel?" Gibbs chuckled. "Noticed 'em, I. Polished to a shine, with a curved heel, like something a city gent would wear. Not practical for village lanes, but he don't seem to care about mud." "Thank you, Mr. Gibbs," Miss Marple said, her smile warm. "You've been most kind." She left the inn, her thoughts buzzing like bees in a hive. The footprint in the aviary, the parcel to London, the locked case, the name Thorne. It was a pattern, not yet complete, but clear enough to warrant action. She returned to her cottage, where she telephoned Lady Beatrice with a request. Could she inquire among her London contacts about a Mr. Reginald Thorne, a collector of rare creatures? The answer came swiftly, relayed through a mutual friend. Thorne was a wealthy eccentric, known for acquiring exotic animals, often through less than legal channels. Miss Marple sat by her window, her knitting resumed, the needles clicking rhythmically as she pondered. "A smuggler," she murmured, "needs a buyer, and Mr. Thorne sounds like a man who buys without asking questions. Mr. Lang, with his fine shoes and locked case, is no merchant of textiles." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "But proof, Jane. Proof is what we need." The parcel, the rustle, the name, they were threads, strong ones, but not yet a rope to bind the thief. She resolved to return to Harrow Hall the next day, to re-examine the aviary, and perhaps set a trap for a man whose sharpness was beginning to cut through his own disguise. Chapter 7. A Village Connection. The afternoon had deepened into a golden haze over the village of St. Mary Mead, where Miss Jane Marple had returned briefly to consult a source as reliable as any Scotland Yard detective, the village gossip. The Red Lion Inn, where Mr. Victor Lang was staying, was but a short walk from her cottage, and Miss Marple, her sensible hat firmly in place, set out with a purpose masked by her unassuming demeanor. The interviews at Harrow Hall had painted a vivid picture. Mr. Dobbs's nervous hands, Miss Henshaw's guarded pride, Mr. Price's meticulous sketches, and Mr. Lang's polished evasion. But it was Lang who lingered in her thoughts, his sharp gaze and sleek shoes aligning too neatly with the faint footprint in the aviary's soil. The village was bustling in its quiet way, with shopkeepers sweeping doorsteps and children darting through the lanes. Miss Marple's destination was not the inn itself, not yet, but the post office, where Mrs. Cleary, the postmistress, presided with an ear for every whisper and a memory for every parcel. Mrs. Cleary was a woman of middle years, with a round face and eyes that missed nothing, and Miss Marple knew her to be a treasure trove of local intelligence, provided one approached her with the right blend of tact and tea. The post office was a cozy nook, its counter cluttered with stamps and ledgers, the air thick with the scent of ink and sealing wax. Mrs. Cleary looked up from sorting letters, her face lighting with a smile as Miss Marple entered. "Why, Miss Marple, what a pleasure. Come about that bird business at Harrow Hall, I'll wager. The village is abuzz with it." Miss Marple's smile was warm, her eyes crinkling with just the right touch of shared curiosity. "You've heard, then, Mrs. Cleary. I'm helping Lady Beatrice with the matter, and I thought you might have seen something, or someone, that could shed light. A stranger, perhaps, passing through?" Mrs. Cleary leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, aye, there's been a stranger. A tall fellow, sharp-looking, staying at the Red Lion. Called himself Lang. A merchant, he said, but his hands are too clean for bolts of cloth, if you ask me. Came in here the day after the exhibition, sending a parcel to London. Small it was, wrapped tight in brown paper, marked fragile in bold letters. Paid extra for haste, too, like he couldn't be rid of it fast enough." Miss Marple's fingers, though empty of her knitting needles, seemed to click in her mind. "A parcel," she said softly, her tone encouraging. "How interesting. Did you happen to see what was in it, Mrs. Cleary? Or perhaps where it was addressed?" Mrs. Cleary shook her head, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the tale. "No peeking, Miss Marple. You know me better than that. But I saw the address. Some place in London, a street I didn't recognize, and a name. Thorne, I think it was. Reginald Thorne. The parcel was heavy for its size, and I heard a faint rustle, like something moving inside. Could have been papers, mind, but it gave me a queer feeling." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, though her smile remained serene. "A rustle, you say? And Mr. Lang, did he seem anxious or in a hurry?" "Anxious as a cat in a storm," Mrs. Cleary said, nodding vigorously. "Kept looking over his shoulder, like he thought someone was watching, paid in cash, no questions, and was out the door before I could say more than, 'Good day.' Not the sort to linger for a chat, that one." Miss Marple nodded, her mind weaving this new thread into the tapestry of the case. A parcel, sent the day after the theft, marked fragile and addressed to a London name, Reginald Thorne. The rustle, faint but telling, suggested something alive, something small enough to fit a cage. "You've been most helpful, Mrs. Cleary," she said, her voice warm. "One more thing. Did Mr. Lang send anything else, or receive any letters while he's been here?" Mrs. Cleary pursed her lips, thinking. "No letters, Miss Marple, but he did ask about the train times to London. Same day he sent the parcel. Said he might be leaving soon, though he's still at the inn, far as I know. Queer sort of merchant, if you ask me. No samples, no talk of trade, just that parcel and a lot of looking about." Miss Marple's smile deepened, though her eyes were sharp as needles. "Queer indeed. Thank you, Mrs. Cleary. I may stop by again, if you don't mind." She left the post office, her steps slow but purposeful, her mind turning over the new information. A parcel to London, a name, a rustle. These were not proof, but they were signposts, pointing toward a truth that was beginning to take shape. She decided to visit the Red Lion, a sturdy old inn at the village's heart, its sign swinging gently in the breeze. The landlord, Mr. Gibbs, was a jovial man with a knack for remembering his guests, and Miss Marple found him polishing glasses behind the bar. "Miss Marple," he greeted, his face creasing with a grin. "Come about that fancy bird, I reckon? Everyone's talking about it." "Something like that, Mr. Gibbs," Miss Marple said, her tone light. "I understand a Mr. Lang is staying here, a merchant, I believe. Could you tell me about him?" Gibbs's grin faded slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Lang, aye. Tall chap, smooth talker, checked in a few days before the exhibition. Keeps to himself, mostly, but he's got a way about him, like he's always watching. Paid for his room in advance, cash, no fuss. Keeps a locked case in his room, small, like a bird cage, though I've not seen inside it. Said it's for his samples, but he don't show 'em to anyone." Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her expression remained placid. "A locked case," she said softly. "How interesting. Has he had any visitors, or made any calls?" "No visitors," Gibbs said, "but he used the telephone yesterday, late. Couldn't hear much, but he sounded sharp, like he was giving orders. Mentioned London and a name. Thorne, I think. Same as on a letter I saw on his table when I brought up his tea. Didn't read it, mind, but the name stuck." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. "You've a good memory, Mr. Gibbs. One last thing. His shoes. Have you noticed them? Fine leather, perhaps, with a distinctive heel." Gibbs chuckled. "Noticed 'em, aye. Polished to a shine, with a curved heel, like something a city gent would wear. Not practical for village lanes, but he don't seem to care about mud." "Thank you, Mr. Gibbs," Miss Marple said, her smile warm. "You've been most kind." She left the inn, her thoughts buzzing like bees in a hive. The footprint in the aviary, the parcel to London, the locked case, the name Thorne. It was a pattern, not yet complete, but clear enough to warrant action. She returned to her cottage, where she telephoned Lady Beatrice with a request. Could she inquire among her London contacts about a Mr. Reginald Thorne, a collector of rare creatures? The answer came swiftly, relayed through a mutual friend. Thorne was a wealthy eccentric, known for acquiring exotic animals, often through less than legal channels. Miss Marple sat by her window, her knitting resumed, the needles clicking rhythmically as she pondered. "A smuggler," she murmured, "needs a buyer, and Mr. Thorne sounds like a man who buys without asking questions. Mr. Lang, with his fine shoes and locked case, is no merchant of textiles." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "But proof, Jane, proof is what we need." The parcel, the rustle, the name, they were threads, strong ones, but not yet a rope to bind the thief. She resolved to return to Harrow Hall the next day, to re-examine the aviary, and perhaps set a trap for a man whose sharpness was beginning to cut through his own disguise. Chapter 9. The Collector's Confession. The train to London rattled through the countryside, its rhythm a counterpoint to Miss Jane Marple's thoughts, as she sat by the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The discoveries at Harrow Hall and St. Mary Mead, the footprint, the crimson feather, the parcel sent by Mr. Lang to a certain Reginald Thorne, had tightened the web around the suspected smuggler. But Miss Marple knew that suspicion alone was not enough. Proof, tangible and undeniable, was needed to secure the return of the crimson-crested Astropia, and London, with its shadowed markets and secretive collectors, held the key. She had persuaded Lady Beatrice to remain at Harrow Hall, coordinating with the local police, while she pursued the trail to Reginald Thorne, the collector whose name had surfaced like a buoy in a stormy sea. The journey was swift, and by mid-morning Miss Marple found herself in the bustling heart of London, where the air was thick with the hum of motor cars and the cries of newspaper vendors. Thorne's address, gleaned from Lady Beatrice's inquiries, was a discreet townhouse in a quiet square off Bloomsbury, its facade elegant but unassuming, the sort of place where secrets might be kept behind polished doors. Miss Marple, her appearance as unthreatening as a village spinster's, approached with a plan as delicate as her lace gloves. She would pose as a fellow enthusiast, seeking advice on rare birds, a guise that had served her well in coaxing truths from guarded tongues. She rang the bell, and a butler, stiff and formal, answered. "Miss Jane Marple," she said, her voice bright with just the right touch of deference. "I'm an amateur ornithologist, come to consult Mr. Thorne about his collection. I was told he's an authority on exotic species." The butler hesitated, his eyes assessing her plain hat and sensible coat, but her gentle smile and impeccable manners disarmed him. "Mr. Thorne is at home, madam," he said, "but he sees visitors by appointment. May I ask who recommended you?" "Oh, a mutual acquaintance," Miss Marple said vaguely, her tone suggesting a shared world of bird enthusiasts. "Lady Beatrice Harrow, of Harrow Hall. I believe Mr. Thorne knows of her, Zoo." The name, dropped with casual precision, worked its magic. The butler nodded and ushered her into a drawing room, its walls lined with books and glass cases containing stuffed birds, their eyes glinting like marbles in the dim light. Reginald Thorne entered, a man of late middle age with a florid face and a waistcoat strained by indulgence. His eyes, small and shrewd, took in Miss Marple with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice hearty but tinged with wariness. "A pleasure. I understand you're interested in my collection." "Indeed, Mr. Thorne," Miss Marple said, her smile as warm as a summer afternoon. "I've heard you possess some of the rarest specimens in England. I'm particularly fond of birds from the New Guinea region, parrots, birds of paradise, that sort of thing. I wondered if you might share your expertise." Thorne relaxed slightly, his vanity flattered. "You've come to the right place," he said, gesturing to a case where a stuffed lorikeet posed in frozen splendor. "I've been collecting for years, parrots, hornbills, even a few rarities from the Pacific, But New Guinea, you say? Fine birds, those. The Astrapia, for instance. Quite a marvel, though hard to come by. His voice was smooth, but Miss Marple noted a slight tightening of his jaw, as if the mention of the Astrapia had struck a nerve. "Oh, yes," she said, her tone enthusiastic but innocent. "I saw one at Harrow Hall recently, before it was sadly stolen. Such a tragedy. Have you ever had the chance to acquire one, Mr. Thorne?" His eyes flickered, a shadow crossing his face before his smile returned. "Stolen, you say? Dreadful business. No, I've not had an Astrapia in my collection. Too rare, too costly, even for me." He laughed, a forced sound, and Miss Marple noted the way his hands clasped together, as if to steady himself. She nodded, her expression sympathetic. "Of course, one hears of such birds on the black market, but a gentleman like you would never deal in such things, I'm sure." She paused, her eyes drifting to a corner of the room where a crate, partially covered by a cloth, stood against the wall. It was small, wooden, with air holes drilled into its side, and from within came a faint rustle, like feathers against wood. Thorne followed her gaze, his face paling slightly. "Just some new acquisitions," he said quickly, moving to stand between her and the crate. "Nothing of interest yet, still being catalogued." His voice was brisk, but Miss Marple heard the strain in it, the same strain she'd noted in Mr. Lang's careful answers. "How fascinating," she said, her tone unchanged. "Might I see? I do so love to learn about new specimens." She took a step toward the crate, her movements slow and deliberate, as if admiring the room's decor. Thorne's hand shot out, a gesture meant to be casual but betraying his unease. "Not today, I'm afraid. They're not ready for viewing. Dust, you know, and delicate conditions." He steered her toward a chair, his smile now a thin veneer. "Tell me, Miss Marple, what exactly do you hope to learn about these birds?" Miss Marple sat, her hands folded neatly, her eyes bright with innocent curiosity. "Oh, just their care, their habits. I've a small aviary at home, nothing like yours, of course, but I'm keen to improve it. One hears such stories. Birds smuggled in crates, sold to collectors who don't ask questions. It's dreadful, isn't it? How greed can tarnish beauty." Thorne's smile faltered, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. "Dreadful, yes," he said, his voice tight. "I buy only from reputable sources, Miss Marple. Provenance is everything in this trade." But his eyes darted to the crate, and Miss Marple saw the sweat beading on his brow, a telltale sign of a man cornered by his own secrets. She leaned forward, her voice soft but relentless. "I'm sure you do, Mr. Thorne. But if, say, an Astrapia were offered to you, recently, perhaps from a discreet source, would you be tempted? Just to know, of course, for my own curiosity." Thorne's face reddened, and he stood abruptly, his hands clenched. "I've no such bird, Miss Marple, and I resent the implication. I'm a collector, not a criminal." His voice rose, but there was a tremor in it, and Miss Marple noted the way. His eyes avoided hers, seeking the crate instead. "Of course," she said, rising with a serene smile. "I meant no offense. Thank you for your time, Mr. Thorne. You've been most enlightening." She moved toward the door, pausing to glance at the crate once more. The rustle came again, faint but unmistakable, and she saw Thorne's hand twitch, as if longing to cover it more thoroughly. As the butler showed her out, Miss Marple's mind was alight with certainty. "He has the bird," she thought, "or knows where it is. That crate, that rustle, it's no coincidence." She stepped into the square, her heart quickening with the thrill of the chase. At a nearby telephone box, she called Lady Beatrice, her voice calm but urgent. "Beatrice, contact Scotland Yard. Ask them to watch Mr. Thorne's house discreetly. There's a crate in his drawing room, and I believe it holds our Astrapia. Tell them to be ready, but not to act until we have more." Returning to her hotel, Miss Marple sat by the window, her thoughts as precise as her knitting. Thorne's nervousness, the crate, the name on Lang's parcel. They were pieces of a puzzle falling into place. But Lang was the key, and he was still at the Red Lion, unaware that the net was closing. She needed to return to Harrow Hall to set a trap that would force his hand. "A smuggler," she murmured, "is only as good as his secrecy, and Mr. Lang's secrecy is unraveling." The London dusk settled over the city, its lights a constellation of secrets, but Miss Marple's eyes were fixed on the path ahead where the truth of the Astrapia's theft waited to be unveiled. Chapter 10. The Trap is Set. The evening train from London to St. Mary Mead swayed gently through the darkening countryside, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the sharp clarity of Miss Jane Marple's thoughts. Her visit to Reginald Thorne's London townhouse had confirmed her suspicions. The rustling crate, Thorne's nervous deflection, and the web of clues pointing to Mr. Victor Lang all suggested that the crimson-crested Astrapia was not far from recovery. Yet Miss Marple knew that certainty without action was as useless as a needle without thread. She needed to draw Lang out, to force a misstep that would reveal his guilt beyond doubt. As the train neared Harrow Hall, she formulated a plan as delicate and precise as her finest lacework. Upon arriving, Miss Marple was met by Lady Beatrice, whose anxious expression softened at the sight of her friend. The drawing-room at Harrow Hall was aglow with lamplight, its heavy curtains drawn against the evening chill. Over tea, Miss Marple recounted her visit to Thorne, her voice calm but laced with purpose. "The crate in his drawing-room, Beatrice, holds something alive, and I believe it is our bird. Scotland Yard is watching his house, but we must act here to catch Mr. Lang. A smuggler, I've found, is most vulnerable when he thinks his scheme is safe." Lady Beatrice's hands trembled as she set down her cup. "What do you propose, Jane? The police have found nothing concrete, and Lang is still at the Red Lion, free as you please." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "We shall give him a reason to move, Beatrice. A whisper, carefully placed, can unsettle even the most cautious thief. I suggest we gather Mr. Dobbs, Miss Henshaw, and Mr. Price here tomorrow evening, under the pretense of new evidence. Let it slip, discreetly of course, that the police are closing in on the thief, with clues pointing to a stranger in the village. If Lang is our man, he will act, and quickly." Lady Beatrice nodded, her resolve hardening. "And if he runs?" "Then we shall be ready," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. "I've asked Sergeant Polk to keep a watch on the Red Lion in the station. A man like Lang, with his fine shoes and locked case, will not linger where he feels the net tightening." The plan was set, and Lady Beatrice sent invitations to the three suspects, requesting their presence at Harrow Hall the following evening. Miss Marple, meanwhile, returned to the Red Lion to confirm Lang's presence. The landlord, Mr. Gibbs, greeted her with a nod, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Still here, Miss Marple? That Lang fellow's been quiet today, but I saw him packing a bag this morning. Looked like a man with one foot out the door." Miss Marple's smile was serene, though her heart quickened. "Did he, Mr. Gibbs? And that locked case of his?" Still in his room? I saw it under his bed when I swept up, Gibbs said. Small, sturdy, with air holes, like you said. He's mighty particular about it. Won't let anyone near. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs, Miss Marple said, her mind racing. If you see him leave, would you be so kind as to telephone Harrow Hall? It's most important. Gibbs agreed, and Miss Marple left, her thoughts as sharp as her knitting needles. Lang's packing suggested he sensed danger, and her plan would push him further. Back at Harrow Hall, she prepared for the evening's gathering, instructing Lady Beatrice to let slip the rumor of new evidence to each suspect separately. To Mr. Dobbs, she mentioned a footprint that had caught the police's attention. To Miss Henshaw, a feather found near the service gate. To Mr. Price, a parcel traced to London. Each hint was vague enough to avoid accusation, but pointed enough to stir unease. If Lang hears of this, Miss Marple said, he may try to flee, or to move the bird if he still has it. That evening, as the clock struck 7, Miss Marple sat in the drawing-room, her hands folded, her eyes alert. The room was arranged with care, chairs in a semicircle, a fire crackling in the hearth, and a sense of anticipation thick in the air. Lady Beatrice, playing her part admirably, greeted each guest with a mixture of courtesy and veiled concern, mentioning the new developments. In the case, with just the right touch of gravity. Miss Marple observed the reactions. Mr. Dobbs arrived first, his cap twisted in his hands, his face flushed with a mix of relief and worry at the mention of the footprint. "I told you, miss, I locked that cage," he muttered, but his eyes darted to the door as if expecting Lang to appear. Miss Henshaw was next, her clipboard absent but her posture as rigid as ever. The news of the feather made her lips tighten, though she said little, her green eyes scanning the room with a hint of defiance. Mr. Price, clutching his notebook, blinked rapidly when told of the parcel, his spectacles slipping as he stammered, "I hope you find the bird soon, Lady Beatrice. It's such a loss." Lang, however, did not appear. As the hour passed, a telephone call from Mr. Gibbs confirmed Miss Marple's suspicions. Lang had left the Red Lion abruptly, carrying his locked case, and was seen heading toward the station. "He looked spooked, Miss Marple," Gibbs said. "Caught the last train to London, or so he said." Miss Marple's lips curved in a faint smile. "Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. You've been most helpful." She turned to Lady Beatrice, her voice calm but urgent. "Beatrice, telephone Sergeant Pauk. Tell him to alert Scotland Yard to intercept Mr. Lang at the station. He may have the bird, or he may be meeting Thorne. Either way, we must act swiftly." As Lady Beatrice made the call, Miss Marple addressed the 3 suspects, her tone gentle but commanding attention. "I'm sorry to have brought you here under such circumstances," she said, "but the police are close to finding the Astrapia. A footprint, a feather, and a parcel to London have given them a clear trail. We hope to have news soon." She watched their faces. Dobbs's relief, Henshaw's guarded curiosity, Price's nervous fidgeting. None betrayed guilt, but all were unsettled, and Miss Marple knew her trap was working. She excused herself briefly, stepping into the hall to speak with Sergeant Pauk, who had arrived at Harrow Hall. "Sergeant, ensure the station is watched and have someone check Thorne's house again. Lang may try to deliver the bird, if he hasn't already. And the case in his room. Has it been searched?" "Not yet, Miss Marple," Pauk said, his tone respectful but cautious. "We need a warrant, and Lang's gone now, but I'll have the yard ready at the station." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already spinning the next thread. "Very good, Sergeant. A man like Lang doesn't run without reason, and his reason is our bird." She returned to the drawing room, her composure unruffled, but her heart beat with the quiet thrill of the chase. The trap was set, and Lang, with his sharp eyes and sleek shoes, was walking into it. Chapter 11. The Confrontation. The drawing room at Harrow Hall glowed with the soft flicker of lamplight, casting long shadows across the faces of Mr. Dobbs, Miss Henshaw, and Mr. Price, who sat in uneasy silence. The air was thick with anticipation, the fire in the hearth crackling as if echoing the tension of the moment. Miss Jane Marple, seated near Lady Beatrice, maintained her serene composure, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. The trap she had set for Mr. Victor Lang had been sprung. His abrupt departure from the Red Lion, confirmed by Mr. Gibbs, and his dash to the London train suggested a man fleeing the tightening net of suspicion. Yet Miss Marple knew that the final act of this mystery required not just a chase, but a revelation, one that would lay bare the truth of the crimson-crested Astrapia's theft. Lady Beatrice, her nerves taut as a bowstring, glanced at the clock. "Jane, do you think the police will catch him? If Lang has the bird, he could be halfway to London by now." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her voice held a quiet certainty. "A man who runs, Beatrice, often runs into his own trap. Scotland Yard is watching the station, and Mr. Lang's haste may be his undoing. But let us address those present, for they, too, have a part in this story." She turned to the three suspects, her gaze calm but piercing, as if seeing through the veneer of their unease. "Mr. Dobbs, Miss Henshaw, Mr. Price," she began, her tone as mild as if discussing a village tea. "I must thank you for coming this evening. The loss of the Astrapia has been a puzzle, but one that is nearing its solution. The police have found evidence, a footprint in the aviary, a feather by the service gate, a parcel sent to London that points to the thief. I believe we shall have news soon." Mr. Dobbs, his cap a crumpled wreck in his hands, flushed with relief. "I told you, miss, I locked that cage tight. It wasn't me, and I'm glad the truth's coming out." His voice was gruff, but his eyes shone with a sincerity that Miss Marple noted, though she also saw the faint tremor in his fingers, a lingering echo of his financial woes. Miss Henshaw, her posture rigid, clutched her hands together, her green eyes narrowing. "A feather, you say? Near the service gate? I never went that way during the exhibition. I was with the crowd, as I told you." Her tone was sharp, almost defensive, and Miss Marple observed the way her lips tightened, as if guarding a thought she dared not voice. Mr. Price, his spectacles slipping down his nose, fidgeted with his notebook. "A parcel to London? That's dreadful. I hope you find the bird, Miss Marple. My sketches, they're all I have of it now." His voice quavered, and Miss Marple noted the smudge of earth still on his cuff, a detail that had not yet been fully explained. Before she could respond, the telephone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the room like a knife. Lady Beatrice answered, her face paling as she listened. "It's Sergeant Polk," she whispered, covering the receiver. "They've caught Lang at the station, Jane. He had a case with him and... Oh, the bird is inside, alive." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, though her expression remained serene. "Thank you, Beatrice. Please ask the sergeant to join us, and to bring any evidence they've secured." She turned back to the suspects, her voice steady. "It seems, my friends, that the Astrapia has been found. Mr. Lang was apprehended at the station with a case containing the bird. The police are bringing him here, and we shall soon have the full story." The room erupted in murmurs. Dobbs exhaled heavily, his shoulders sagging with relief. Henshaw's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, though Miss Marple noted a hint of calculation in her gaze. Price's spectacles slipped entirely, and he fumbled to catch them, his face a mask of nervous astonishment. As they waited, Miss Marple addressed the group, her tone gentle but firm. The theft of the Astrapia was no simple act. It required knowledge of the cage, access to a key, and a plan to spirit the bird away unnoticed. The footprint in the aviary, with its curved heel, matched Mr. Lang's fine shoes. The feather by the service gate marked his path to the village. The parcel, sent to a Mr. Reginald Thorne in London, carried the bird, or so Lang intended, until he was caught. Dobbs nodded vigorously. "I knew it wasn't me, miss. Those shoes, city shoes, not mine. I told you he was watching that cage too close." Henshaw's lips pursed, but she said nothing, her eyes fixed on Miss Marple as if weighing her words. "Price," stammered. I saw him too, Miss Marple. That sharp look, like he was planning something. But I never thought—" Miss Marple raised a hand, her gesture calming the rising tide of voices. "Mr. Lang, I believe, is a smuggler, dealing not in textiles, but in rare creatures. His buyer, Mr. Thorne, is a collector with a taste for the illicit. The parcel, the locked case, the feather, all point to a scheme carefully planned but not perfectly executed. A thief, you see, always leaves a trace, no matter how clever." The door opened, and Sergeant Polk entered, followed by 2 constables escorting a handcuffed Mr. Lang. His polished exterior was frayed, his coat rumpled, his face pale, his sharp eyes dulled by defeat. Behind them, a constable carried a small wooden case, its air holes confirming Miss Marple's suspicions. A faint rustle came from within, and Lady Beatrice gasped, her hands clasped in hope. "Mr. Lang," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but commanding, "you have been caught with the Astrapia, on your way to deliver it, no doubt, to Mr. Thorne. Will you tell us why you took it, or shall we piece it together ourselves?" Lang's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the faces around him. "I've nothing to say," he muttered, but his voice lacked the smooth charm of their earlier meeting. "You've no proof I stole it?" Miss Marple's smile was almost pitying. "Oh, but we do, Mr. Lang. The footprint in the aviary matches your shoes, down to the curved heel. The feather by the service gate marks your path to the village. The parcel you sent to Mr. Thorne, with its telltale rustle, was meant to deliver the bird to a black market buyer. And your case, found with you at the station, holds the Astrapia itself. Cleverness, Mr. Lang, is no match for carelessness." Lang's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. "It was just business," he said, his voice low. "Thorne pays well for rarities. I saw the bird, saw the chance. The cage was easy. Henshaw left the key in the lodge once, and I had a copy made. No one noticed me in the crowd." Miss Henshaw's face flushed with indignation. "I never left the key out. You're lying." But Miss Marple's raised hand silenced her, her eyes never leaving Lang. "A copy of the key," Miss Marple said softly. "And a moment's distraction during the exhibition. You slipped in, took the bird, and hid it in your case, walking away as if nothing had happened. But you left a footprint, Mr. Lang, and a feather, and those were your undoing." Lang said nothing more, his silence a confession in itself. Sergeant Polk nodded to the constables, who led him away. the case with the Astrapia carefully held. Lady Beatrice turned to Miss Marple, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Jane, you've done it. The bird is safe." Miss Marple's smile was modest, her gaze lingering on the suspects. "The bird is safe, Beatrice, but the human heart is never so simple. Each of you played a part, if only in what you saw, or failed to see." She looked at Dobbs, Henshaw, and Price, their faces a mix of relief and unease, and knew that their stories, too, held lessons, though none as grave as Lang's. Chapter 12. The Bird Returns. The dawn broke over Harrow Hall with a gentle radiance, bathing the zoo's enclosures in a soft light that seemed to celebrate the resolution of the mystery. The crimson-crested Astrapia, recovered from Mr. Lang's ill-fated dash to London, was returned to its gilded cage in the aviary, its iridescent feathers shimmering like a living flame. The bird, unharmed by its ordeal, fluttered its wings in the familiar pattern Miss Henshaw had taught it, as if reclaiming its place in the world. Miss Jane Marple stood by the aviary, her sensible hat tilted slightly against the morning sun, her eyes bright with quiet satisfaction. Lady Beatrice, beside her, radiated relief, her face alight with a joy that softened the lines of worry etched by the past days. "Jane, I cannot thank you enough," Lady Beatrice said, her voice trembling with emotion. "To see the Astrapia back where it belongs, it's a miracle, truly. Your cleverness, your patience. I don't know how you did it." Miss Marple's smile was modest, her hands folded neatly as she gazed at the bird. "Not a miracle, Beatrice, merely observation. People, like birds, leave traces of their actions, and those traces tell a story if one knows how to read them." Her tone was gentle, but her mind was still weaving the threads of the case, ensuring each knot was secure. The confrontation in the drawing room the previous evening had sealed Mr. Lang's fate. His confession, grudging but clear, had confirmed Miss Marple's deductions. The copied key, the swift theft during the exhibition's chaos, the parcel meant for Reginald Thorne's illicit collection. Scotland Yard, alerted by Sergeant Polk, had not only apprehended Lang at the station, but also searched Thorne's townhouse, finding further evidence of his dealings in rare creatures. Lang faced charges of theft and smuggling, while Thorne's collection was under scrutiny, its secrets spilling like feathers from a torn pillow. As Miss Marple and Lady Beatrice walked back to the house, the zoo's grounds buzzed with the quiet industry of morning. Mr. Dobbs was already at work, his heavy boots leaving fresh prints in the gravel as he tended a pair of parrots, his face lighter now that suspicion had lifted. Miss Henshaw, clipboard in hand, was inspecting the aviary's locks, her confidence restored but tempered by a new wariness. Mr. Price, lingering near the entrance with his notebook, sketched the Astrapia. Once more, his spectacles steady now, his nervous fidgeting replaced by a shy nod to Miss Marple. "They're all relieved, Jane," Lady Beatrice said, glancing at the trio. "But I wonder, did any of them know more than they let on?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her expression remained serene. Mr. Dobbs's debts made him anxious, but his loyalty to the animals held true. Miss Henshaw's pride blinded her to the key's vulnerability, but she meant no harm. Mr. Price's sketches were perhaps too curious, but his heart was with the bird's beauty, not its theft. They were not guilty, Beatrice, but they were human, and humans falter in small ways that can aid a thief's boldness. They entered the drawing room, where a tray of tea awaited, its steam curling like the mist that had greeted Miss Marple's first day at Harrow Hall. As they sat, Lady Beatrice pressed her friend further. "And Lang, how did you know it was him, Jane, from the start?" "Not from the start, my dear," Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. "But the footprint in the aviary, with its curved heel, was too fine for a zookeeper's boots or a trainer's practicality. The feather by the service gate marked a path only Lang admitted to taking. The parcel to Thorne, the rustle Mrs. Cleary heard, the locked case at the Red Lion. These were not accidents, but signposts. And his manner, so polished, so guarded, was that of a man who lives by secrets." She paused, her eyes distant. "In my village, Beatrice, I've seen such men, charming, clever, but always leaving a trace, like a bird shedding a feather." Lady Beatrice shook her head, marveling. "You make it sound so simple, Jane, but it's extraordinary. What will you do now? Back to St. Mary Mead, I suppose." Miss Marple nodded, her smile wistful. "Yes, to my cottage and my knitting. But mysteries, you know, have a way of finding me, even in a quiet village." She glanced out the window, where the Astrapia's cage gleamed in the sunlight. "The bird is safe, and that is enough for now." As she boarded the afternoon train back to St. Mary Mead, her valise light but her mind rich with the case's lessons, Miss Marple reflected on the nature of theft. "People," she murmured, watching the countryside blur past, "seek beauty or gain, but they cannot hide their footsteps, and footsteps, like stitches, always lead somewhere." Her hands, empty of needles, rested calmly, but her eyes were already alert for the next puzzle, the next thread to unravel in the quiet tapestry of human nature.